Do the wealthy migrate from high-tax states? That is the title of a new report from the Pioneer Institute here in Boston. And the question sort of answers itself, doesn't it? Of course, they migrate from high-tax states. Wealthy residents and businesses are fleeing Massachusetts at a troubling rate, an exodus that could grow now that working remotely is gaining widespread acceptance. And this report was authored by Greg Sullivan. He's the former Inspector General of the state and also a former state representative in a while back. And he wrote this, and it's pretty interesting stuff. I mean, we all kind of know it's true. And I don't consider myself a plutocrat, but I'm trying to get the hell out of Massachusetts, and it's going to get worse if they pass this so-called millionaire's tax, which is always a tax that's initially placed on people making over $1 million. But people will try to get under $1 million, just like they'll try to get under $50 million in net assets if Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax were ever imposed, God forbid. So joining us now on the line is Greg Sullivan, the former Inspector General, the Director of Research at the Pioneer Institute. Greg, thanks for being with us here on the Howie Carr Show.
Thanks, Howie. It's great to be on.
So how big of a problem is this now, and how big of a problem is it going to be if they pass this so-called millionaire's tax, if they pass the TCI tax to quadruple or triple the tax on gasoline? I mean, everything that Beacon Hill seems to be interested in doing is going to drive anybody out of the state who can afford to get out, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, if you look at the data that's published by the Internal Revenue Service and the Census Bureau in Washington about high-income people moving out of states and moving into states, Massachusetts is in the losing end. They're in the top 10 worst states for losing high-income individuals. More than $20 billion has been lost in recent years. The number one destination is Florida. Second is New Hampshire. Almost 3/4 of folks who work in Massachusetts and move to other states move to those two states. Both are states with no income tax, no capital gains tax, and no estate taxes.
And now we have a situation where New Hampshire, joined by a number of other states, is suing Massachusetts and trying to get the case to the Supreme Court because Massachusetts is imposing income taxes on New Hampshire residents who are employed by Massachusetts companies, but in many cases, these New Hampshire residents haven't set foot to work in Massachusetts in almost a year.
I am really glad that you brought that up because Governor Sununu brought a case before the United States Supreme Court in October. Previously, if you lived in New Hampshire and you worked in Massachusetts, let's say you worked 4 days a week in Massachusetts, then you would only pay 80% of the income tax to Massachusetts. If you work, half the days, you pay half. What the state did in the beginning of the pandemic was they decided that they were going to change that, which they've been doing forever, and tax all of your income. Well, in New Hampshire, they brought this case, and this is a very big deal. If you look at this in the national press, it really affects Massachusetts and New York. So it's just really dangerous because people with a lot of assets and high income, all they have to do is establish a residence and just, very close to us in New Hampshire and work from home in the Zoom economy. And that's dangerous.
And this, why don't you explain to people what this millionaire's tax, this graduated income tax, it's going to be on the ballot in all likelihood in 2022, right?
Yeah, they call it the millionaire's tax. It's a proposal that would impose a 4% additional tax on all income above $1 million in Massachusetts.
So in other words, they call it a 4%, but it goes from 5% to 9%. So it's actually an 80% increase in taxes.
Massachusetts right now, but the average of income tax rates in the country at 5%, up to for the fifth highest. But even worse than that, it makes our short-term capital gains tax rate the highest in the country. Effectively, would be the highest in the world. So if you're a day trader, if you're involved with trading stocks and bonds, you don't want to be in Massachusetts if this passes. I can understand why people would say, look, let's tax millionaires. They can afford it. We need the money. But what people don't realize is the ramifications of it. Look what's happened in Connecticut. Look what's happening in California right now. With Elon Musk just became a resident of tax-free Texas. Hewlett Packard moved. Oracle moved. Charles Schwab moved. They're moving out in droves from San Francisco. That's our twin city out there in West Coast.
Ben Shapiro, who owns the Daily Wire, he moved everything to Tennessee. Again, another no income tax state.
Yeah, you want to know one of the most interesting statistics I've ever seen about this subject is the states with the highest capital gains reported are Wyoming, Nevada, Florida, and Washington. All four have no capital gains tax. There's no coincidence. Those four states have higher capital gains tax than New York with Wall Street. Put it that way. It's no coincidence, because when people have a lot of assets, they don't want to be hit with a very, very high tax rate, which is what's on the ballot in Massachusetts.
Right, and all these states that have imposed quote unquote millionaires taxes. I think there's Connecticut, New Jersey, Maryland, all these states on the East Coast.
California's the big one.
They've all been hit by these massive exoduses of high income taxpayers. There was one guy in New Jersey. His name, I think, was Tepper. And they put in the so-called millionaires tax, and he immediately decamped for Florida. And the state budget, just by this guy Tepper, he's a hedge fund guy, the budget in New Jersey took a $50 million hit on this one guy leaving. One guy.
Yeah, but this guy moved, Tepper. He moved, and the state was required to disclose it in Wall Street on their bond offerings. That's how big it was. And what people don't realize is that the really high wealth people in the country, you can resent them or think it's not fair or whatever. But the point is, if they move out of your state, it has a huge impact, and that's what's worrying me about Massachusetts, because Massachusetts is a great state, but we're kind of built out. All the growth, like when I was working with you long ago, and I was in the House of Representatives, Massachusetts had 12 congressmen. Now we have 9. We may soon have 8. Meanwhile, Texas went from 27 to 45. We're in the losing end on the growth cycle. So it's not a good idea, in my opinion, to start to impose very, very high taxes and think that it's just going to money.
And the thing is that, Greg, since we've been alive, you and I, we're about the same age. We've seen these votes on graduated income taxes. They always get voted down because people can figure out it's a scam. That they say it's only for millionaires, but it's going to be pushed down on everybody. But I'm just afraid that now the population has been dumbed down enough so that they figure they can pass this thing. And enough productive citizens have already left the state that would normally be voting against the graduated income tax. And I put myself in that. I'm now a registered voter. I live half the year in Massachusetts, but I'm now a registered voter in Florida. So I'm not going to be around to, put my finger in the dike to stop the graduated income tax from going through. And there are hundreds of thousands of people like me, aren't there?
Yeah, it's a tough thing. They just had a vote in Illinois very recently, like in November, as to whether to repeal their tax system and have a graduate income tax. It was defeated. It was an epic battle out there. So it's not impossible to defeat it. But in Massachusetts, what the proponents have done is they have it apply in the Constitution just to people who make $1 million or more. But it's escalation factor, which is a bad escalation factor too, by the way. But anyway, that's where they hope to get that in. But what we've seen in other states is once it's adopted, then the states go back in. That's what happened in New York. That's what's happened in California. It's a step-by-step process to say, who's wealthy,
Right.
$1 million, or should it be $500,000?
Well, they say, well, we thought we were going to get enough money from the millionaire's tax. But we didn't. And people fled the state, those bastards. So we're going to have to drop the millionaire's tax to 500,000. And then it keeps dropping and dropping and dropping. That's the way it's been in every state. And it's going to be that way in Massachusetts. We know that.
Well, in California, they adopted the mother of all millionaires' taxes with a gigantic increase called Proposition 30 back in 2004, and it was a temporary tax. Then it became a tax for 30 years. Now they're voting to increase it and include a wealth tax in California.
Wealth tax.
So it's just the idea, the idea is, put a tax on high income people, and you're gonna make out. The interesting thing to me is Governor Mario Cuomo. Mario Cuomo, they proposed a millionaire's tax in New York to increase it, and he said no, a wealth tax. He said no, don't do that because everyone's just going to move to Connecticut. Don't you understand that?
Right. Greg Sullivan, we got a break, but where can people go if they want to read your report, Do the Wealthy Migrate from High Tax States? Where can they read that?
Well, you can go on www.pioneerinstitute.org. And Howie, my last thought, I want to say it's the 5-year anniversary of Barbara Anderson passing away. Wow. And I just remember you and Jerry Williams and Barbara Anderson, the governors in the late 80s and early 90s, and what a phenomenon that was. It really was.
Thanks for remembering that, Greg. And I remember you stopping the sales tax on services when Dukakis said it was only on four different services, and you just read it for hours. It was hundreds of things. That was when Democrats cared about working people. Greg Sullivan, thank you for being with us, and we'll tweet out a link to his report from the Pioneer Institute, To the Wealthy Migrate from High Tax States. Thank you, Greg Sullivan. It's a great report. We're all looking for ways to save money, right? We're just talking about paying higher taxes, especially now. So let me ask you this. How'd you like to keep an extra $961 a year in your pocket? That's how much Gabby customers save per year on average on car and home insurance. That's why when I was shopping for insurance, I used Gabby. This is the time of year we all go shopping for insurance to save some money. Well, Gabby takes the pain out of shopping for insurance by giving you an apples-to-apples comparison of your current coverage with 40 of the top insurance providers in the country, like Nationwide, Progressive, and Travelers. Just link your current insurance account, and in minutes, you'll be able to see quotes for the exact same coverage that you currently have. I'm not very good on these kinds of computer issues, but it was fast and it was easy for me to use it. I was with my old car insurance company for more than 20 years, and I just got into the habit of paying. The original agent died, then his wife took over. She sold out. I just kept paying the bills that came in. I never looked around. I just never kept up with the changes in insurance that would save me money. It was long overdue for me to go to Gabby. I logged in with my current insurance. I was shown dozens of quotes, and I saved myself over $500 from Gabby's new policy. As I mentioned earlier, on average, Gabby customers save $961 per year on average. So I saved less than the average person who goes on. I'll bet that would be nice to have in your pocket every year, almost $1,000. If they can't find you savings like they did for me, they'll let you know so you can relax knowing you have the best rate out there. And they will never, ever sell your info, so no annoying spam or robocalls. You're probably overpaying on car and home insurance, especially if you haven't checked for a long time. See how much Gabby can save you. It's totally free to check and there's no obligation. Go to Gabby.com/Howie. That's GABI.com/Howie. GABI, Gabby.com/Howie. I'm Howie Carr.
Don't touch that dial. Howie Carr will be back after this.
This hour.